So with that an update to you, let me now request Abha to take the floor and just a couple of sentences, a dear friend and colleague. But when we requested Abha, she was hesitant, saying that I'm not an architect. And I said, you're the person who employs architects for this kind of work. You know, for many of us who get into the development stream, especially in places. Abha, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. As Anshu said, I am not an architect, I am not an engineer. The only thing which makes me stand before you today is working with all of you. And what I am going to say or talk about is my experience of working with architects from 2000 after the super cyclone of Orissa till date, and how you all have been contributing. I'm not getting into the technical details. I'm just going to highlight why and how you can contribute, and why it is very important that you have to get in touch with the communities who are there. And it's not just the community who owns the house, but also the community of engineers, the architects who are working with the government, with the private sector. Unfortunately, somewhere, once you get into a government job or in a private sector, you stop thinking of connecting back. And that's what some of the architects and engineers from schools like you have gone to Orissa after the super cyclone and did something great, which we revisited during the cyclone filing in 2013, which happened, and we still find the roofs standing. So there's something good which you all did. And that's to be appreciated and to actually understand what you did and how you did. If you look at this building, it's not a house. It's an Anganwadi center. What till now, all the, talks about the braces, the bands, but the designing part has been missed out somewhere. And if you look at this building, can I have the slide back, please? If you look at this, you see a design in it. You see the, the architecture or the engineering aspects also. If you look at the roof, you see a filler. It's a Mangalorian tile filled up slab. It is a two-storied actually Anganwadi center, which also houses a school. You see the arch frames. All these are your designs, the architectural designs. The planning of using this space, the limited space, within the given money. Many times what happens is, when a disaster occurs, you get more money. So you are able to build back better. But a lot of times also, you would find that the numbers which have been shown across from the morning, you have 750,000 houses to be built, but you actually have only money for 250,000 buildings in extra money. You are still going in with the housing sector, rural housing sector, 140,000. At that time when these were being built, the IOA houses, it had only 28,000. Now you have to build the house for a rural poor in 28,000. Using the technologies which have been discussed, using certain designs which will withstand any future disaster. So what did these guys do? Of course, like was mentioned, you went across, talked to the people, you designed it according to what their requirements were. Along with that also, you brought in an element of engineering, which you have, which maybe the common people doesn't have. If you go to the rural areas even today, in urban areas you would find an architect or an engineer somewhere in the city. But in the rural areas, there are no one. And these barefoot engineers, and I can tell you, in 2000, when we started the project, the pay was only 8,000 rupees for an engineer And the engineers could have gone into a private sector and earned about 20 to 25,000, but they were willing to work, come together, and build these type of infrastructure. The way they went about, I can also cite an example where an engineer was actually, he was an engineer come architect. He was actually challenged by the local masons, saying the houses you are telling us, because if you look at the houses, it also have a cost-effective element to it. It's not just about the designing and use of concrete and brick structure, but it also had an element of cost effectiveness, because they say, I'm just going to use the language with the engineers use, and I've learnt over time. Instead of the English bond, they started using the rat trap bonding. Instead of the flat roof structures, they brought in fillers. Like in one I showed you, there was a tile filler, but in some places they also used coconut and coconut shells, and they were challenged. So this engineer said, okay, if the mason goes at any point of time and breaks the house, I'll give him 500 rupees. At the same night, 5 masons went with rods to hit the wall which had been constructed to see if they can break it. But they were not able to do it. And from that day, I can tell you that mason today has already constructed about 2,000 houses in Orissa, in the coastal belt, Puri district, and he refuses to build the normal houses. So that is the, command which you also have, because you are educated, where they will listen to you if you demonstrate. So building back better is also an opportunity for all of us to showcase how a little bit of technological improvement in the traditional structure can help to build back better, which we can also withstand. Not only for seismic safety, but I would say for flood and the cyclones also. Now, an added dimension to it is the climate variability. In places, we are having high heat, hot days, and cold days also. Those are improving. Are we going to build in it? Because in many places, people don't want to go back to those houses or live in the structures which has been created, is because they feel they are very hot. Because of certain technology, earlier they had thatch roofs, so it was cool enough. Or they had thick bricks, which also had a cooling effect. So how do you bring that? And that's where you have to invest your time and energy. As Anshu mentioned, yes, UNDP engaged a lot of engineers and architects during these times. You really find a lot of time. But even pre-disaster situations, your knowledge, your way of working, and your approach to community would be very, very useful to build a safer housing stock, not only in terms of individual housing, but also the rural infrastructure, which starts from schools, Anganwadi shelters, PHCs, CHCs. The thing is, you need to go to them. They are not so aware. For a rural person, or even for an urban slum dweller, a mason is the king. Anything he says, if he says 10 mm rods instead of 12 mm rods, he will accept it. So we really need to go, make us approachable, and work with them. Aishu is standing in front of me. I don't know why. Okay, and the only thing which I would say, we are, as UNDP, we are also trying to support certain state governments in coming up with greener technology for housing. And yes, many a times it would be not as paying as some of your urban jobs are, but it is there. Like in Orissa, we have started the process where we would be introducing within the rural housing scheme how to improve the stock for disaster resilience. They are going to engage a lot of people. It's a learning experience. When you start with a village background or a local background, you learn a lot, and it also gives you a lot of idea to innovate. With this, I think I will stop because Anshu is there. The only thing you can show the pictures, which is still standing after, let's say, 15, 12, 13 years. And it's all your contribution to building. Next. It's in Puri districts. There's a mason. We did a review of the program. This is the mason who has refused to do anything the normal construction way. He builds earthquake-resistant houses using cost-effective technologies. And he was trained under the project by architects and engineers, and they were absolutely freshers. They were trained by Mr. Rajendra Desai, P.K. Das, and many of these engineers still get calls from these masons who have been trained to get, if they are not, get confused about something, or they think about a new thing which needs to be done. There was also a building which in these areas, there are many religious places which have used the same technologies to come up, besides the private houses also. Thank you very much.